Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Welcome to this latest TM Forum webinar. A topic slightly different from many that we normally do. And in fact, this is the first time I think we've actually done a webinar on this topic. Delayering the business is breaking up the key to telco growth. And the next hour, we're going to be talking about this trend in the industry for operators to delay their businesses. We'll explain what that is and what that means for how the different businesses are operated, implications for the systems that underpin those businesses. Delighted to be joined today by Piyush Mishra, Associate Vice President, Pre-Sales at Technotree. Good afternoon to you, Piyush.
Hi,
Dominic Smith.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, hey Piyush, and Dominic Smith. And Dominic is Marketing Director at Cerillion, based in London. So good afternoon to you, Dominic.
Thank you, Mark, and hello everybody. Yeah, really looking forward to taking part in this webinar today.
And before Piyush and Dominic turn the cameras off, just a word of thanks to both Cerillion and Technotree for supporting us on this piece of research and this webinar. As much as we love producing research, we have an analyst team that does just that. We wouldn't be able to do so without the support of companies such as Technotree and Cerillion. So thank you so much for working with us on the project. So how we'll run the session today is that in a minute I'll run through the findings of a piece of research that we're going to publish imminently on delayering, and then we'll move into a panel discussion with Piyush and Dominic. You out there, the audience, would love to hear from you. So you have the chance to ask questions to any or each of us or all of us using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So Dominic and Piyush, thank you. I've asked you to turn your cameras off, and we'll see you in 20 minutes time. So if you can just move on to the first slide, Maureen. So this term delayering, and I'm willing to bet that if I started talking about delayering 4 or 5 years ago, you probably wouldn't have been clear to you what I'm talking about now. Delayering is, I think, emerged as a term that we use for netco, servco, infraco delineation over the last 2, 3, 4 years, and I think it contains two concepts. So on the one hand, it is simply a different way of organizing your own telecoms operator organization, and organizing it so that you have a services business, a network business, infrastructure business, and structuring it in that way to maximize the potential of those different parts of the organization. And companies may decide that having created that separation, or even before doing so, that they want to realize shareholder value in the organization by spinning off, selling off all or part of an infrastructure business, a network business, or a servco business. The other thing that has happened, of course, in the last 5 years is that the infraco creation has become a reality as mobile operators have separated out, in some cases, spun off their tower businesses. Another point that I think I'll make here, and we'll touch on this a little bit more detail a little bit later, which is that in any sector of business, when you have a business which is mature, where revenue growth is challenging, shareholders will look at a business and say, is there any way of creating more value to shareholders in terms of how we structure the organization? It's not just a telco issue. In any business, you might look at whether you want to make the parts of the organization, separate them out in order to drive value to the whole. And I think there's a belief in telco, which is that the sum of the parts of the integrated telco business does not represent the value of the individual components of that organization. Now, if we think about servco, netco, infraco. So I mentioned infraco. So infraco on the mobile side, infraco is the towers. It's the passive infrastructure. But you can also extend infraco to the fixed business, where you might think about the ducts that you lay your cables in being part of InfraCo. You might well think about a data center being an infrastructure organization. And so we haven't seen as much activity in terms of those parts of the organization spin off, but there are examples and maybe there'll be more. So that's the InfraCo business. When we think of NetCo, ServCo, so the NetCo is the active part of the network. It's what delivers value to the customers. It's the mobile network, the fixed network, the active network. There's some discussion around spectrum. Spectrum could sit in InfraCo or could sit in NetCo. At the moment, the tower spin-offs, the NetCo has kept hold of the spectrum assets. So the NetCo is the network business, and it is effectively a network and a wholesale business. So the NetCo business sells connectivity or wholesales connectivity to companies that sit above it, which are ServCo businesses. And so, again, if we think about the classic integrated telecoms operator organization today, it would mean separating out the wholesale business and putting in the NetCo business. The retail business that serves end customers would be part of the ServCo business. So the ServCo business is everything which is customer facing. So it's the retail and services organization. Within TM Forum vernacular, network as a service sits within NetCo, and connectivity as a service, when you're actually delivering connectivity as a service to an enterprise, for example, that is connectivity as a service. Network as a service is what's provided upwards towards the ServCo. Oh, and we'll be coming back to this. That's largely the split: ServCo, NetCo, InfraCo. It's not always clear where the dividing line sits. So when we think about NetCo and ServCo, there is, I think, some discussion around those sort of higher layers, the higher network layers, and whether they belong to ServCo or NetCo. So there's no absolute definition of where all the functions sit and where all the functions are divided. So when we think about this concept of delayering, why has it happened? I mean, we can look at it from a financial perspective, and we can look at it from a regulatory perspective. They are the two starting points. So that's very important. So there's a financial starting point, there's a regulatory starting point. There is not today, I would argue, and maybe in discussion we can move on to this, there's not today a strategic starting point for delayering, but that could change. That could change. And I think as operators embrace more cloud native capabilities, as we start to make it easier to for those organizations to separate out and reassemble, I think it may become a more strategic choice. But from a financial perspective, why are operators looking at doing this? Well, I mean, this quote from Bain, I think, is quite interesting. The valuation of the company should be equal to some of its parts. This is no longer the case for many CSPs. There's many ways of thinking about from a finance perspective. Is it a lack of revenue growth? Is there too much debt in the organizations that need cash? Italy, Telecom Italia being a great example of too much debt in the organization, so that being a driver for NetCo, ServCo separation. Too much legacy cost. Regulatory pressure we've talked about. So in many of the examples, some of them, actually maybe not many, some of the examples, the starting point has been that an operator looks at the telecoms market and says, this CSP, this operator has too much control, too much dominance in the marketplace. We need to do something drastic to reduce its dominance in the marketplace. And I think the thinking point is largely we create a network organization, and then we have the former incumbent having a service organization which competes with other services organizations. And I think the other thing I forgot to mention in terms of the ServCo, the world of MVNOs, digital brands, they all sit within the ServCo business. Next slide, please, Maureen. So some of these are a little bit small for you to read, but this timeline, 2020, 2023, gives you examples of operators that have separated out and spun off or so and sold part or all of their tower businesses, their infrastructure businesses in the mobile side. And this was driven by a desire to realize value for shareholders. And the case could also be made that is driven by a desire to release CapEx to invest in new capabilities such as 5G or in the future 6G. And there have been examples globally. It truly is now a global phenomenon. And we're seeing the emergence of both national and international tower groups. So companies such as American Tower. In some cases, you have operator groups like Vodafone with Vantage Networks has a very large tower group. I think we may see consolidation of those tower organizations. Although I think the question does still need to be asked, how clear is it that there are cross-border synergies of different passive infrastructure businesses? That's an interesting discussion to have. The other point, I guess, I didn't make in terms of NetCo, ServCo, InfraCo businesses is that, in terms of the traction of doing it, is that by splitting up the business into different parts, you're attracting different types of investors. So I think when we think about the NetCo business, or maybe even more to the tower businesses, digital infrastructure businesses, these are where you generate stable long-term returns. They're very attractive to something like pension funds, where I think something like a services business is necessarily going to be more uncertain. There'll be more innovation, less clear what returns might be. So I'd say these are examples of delayering. I mean, do we call the spin-off of towers delayering? Well, yes, I guess it is, but I think the next wave of delayering, ServCo, NetCo, is a bigger strategic change. The example here of Telecom Italia is a specific one. You might have been following this, which is essentially a move to reduce debt and the sale of fixed network assets to KKR for 24 billion is something which is happening, but it has been held up because wrangles over shareholders and valuations. Next slide, please. Okay, so if we run through the history of delayering, as you can see, we've identified about 12 operators, 12 national operators globally. Where I think Dominic is going to put me right on this in a panel discussion is that this slide only looks at national licensed operators. There is also a very interesting set of discussions taking place, I think, in what we call in the altnet market as well. And so regional players, particularly regional broadband operators, regional fiber operators. Certainly in the UK, where I'm based, in many countries across the world now, we've seen an explosion of investment in city-based or regionally based fiber operators. And they've started life often as integrated retail and wholesale operators. But increasingly, those fiber businesses are looking to create strong wholesale organizations. They realize that they need to be able to capture both wholesale and retail opportunities to maximize their potential in a particular marketplace today. So that's very interesting, isn't it? Which is that a new market, sort of regional fiber, actually started to drive some of this. I think a lot of that is maybe also driven by the investment profile in those altnet companies. A lot of pension fund money coming to those organizations, and as we've mentioned, from this sort of investor perspective, there's clearly a strong liking for these stable, long-term digital infrastructure investments. So just walking you through some of these examples here, and these are useful because they highlight some of the drivers for the change. So they go back quite a long way. So if we go all the way back to 2005, this is Iceland, and it was the classic privatization of the separation out of the telco from the postal business. 2007, there's a separation out of, I think there's 2 NetCos and 1 ServCo created, and Simin is the NetCo, if I remember rightly. There's a company called Mila, I think, which is ServCo. and the NetCo was sold to a UK private equity firm in 2021, serving all the ServCos. Telstra, this was very much regulatory driven. So the Australian regulators believing back in 2012 that Telstra had too much dominance in the marketplace today, created a regulatory framework as a result of which Telstra divested itself of its broadband network business, and a new company called NBN Co was created as a state-owned provider, wholesaler of broadband services. That's an interesting case study, actually, because I think certainly last time I looked at this, there wasn't altogether certainty that that NBN Co was meeting the requirements of the fixed broadband market in the same way that an integrated retail wholesale provider might do. So that's quite an interesting one there. Then we have Telecom New Zealand, which around the same time as Telstra created a company called Chorus, which was the NetCo, the network operator, and Spark New Zealand, which is a services company. Interestingly, looking at the most recent financials of both Chorus and Spark New Zealand, not altogether clear that they've benefited from the separation. I know that Spark New Zealand has been very aggressive in terms of diversifying in the B2B space in areas such as managed cloud services, security services, IoT. From what I had seen, they had been growing pretty well. I think the most recent year they suffered a bit of a setback in terms of revenue growth. If we carry down the bottom, let's finish off top first. So O2 Czech Republic, very high profile. So O2 part of Telefonica Group. Business was sold to Macquarie, which was investment bank. They then sold the NetCo business company called Stettin, I think, which is a pure NetCo business. And interestingly, that's now actually also taken in some the NetCo businesses from Telenor in Eastern Europe. So that's sort of a growing NetCo business, which I think is well worthwhile looking at. TDC Group, we talk about a lot at TM4 because we run an event in Copenhagen. So TDC separated and became New Day and TDC Net. Again, from a market perspective, not altogether clear that the businesses are growing more rapidly than they would have done had they been in part of an integrated organization. And lastly, Telenor, which has created an infrastructure organization to a fiber unit. So a number of different examples here, different drivers, but mainly they are finance-based or regulatory-based. The overall picture, I think, so if we include that discussion along with the one around the tower businesses, and you ask the question, is it clear today that delayering improves the business performance of the NetCo, ServCo, and InfraCo organizations? It would be difficult to categorically say that that was the case, but they have driven shareholder value because there are higher valuations, certainly for the NetCo businesses with EBITDA, trading at EBITDA 17 to 20, something like that. So yes, it's driven value to shareholders, but we've yet to see the business improvements. And that's something actually I will spend some time speaking to Dominic and Piyush about after these slides. So next slide, please, Maureen. Will ServCos face the same growth challenges the CSPs face now? So I think we're all aware that the telco business globally is flat. It's stagnating. It does vary market to market, but telco business really isn't a growth business. And so, if we think about the challenges that so clearly there's opportunities for NetCos to have multiple ServCo customers. So not just the organization that was part of the same company, but also to sell network capabilities to other ServCos, which might be MVNOs, they might be digital brands, they might be players we've never heard of before. So we can see a path to growth for NetCos. The ServCo discussion, in many ways, I think, is a more interesting discussion because when we think about the retail telecoms business, yes, there has been and there is competition from ISPs on the fixed side, from MVNOs on the mobile side. I would argue that that competition has been reasonably limited. The question in my mind becomes one of, if the NetCo and the ServCo act purely in their own separate, distinct interests, what will the ServCo market look like in 5-10 years' time? Is there any reason to think that the existing ServCo organization will be able to retain its dominance in the retail market? And I think the discussion there is around, as consumers become more comfortable with buying mobile connectivity propositions online via an app, via a website, will they necessarily go to the operator brand for that? Will they go to third-party brands? I think certainly the MVNO, the digital brand marketplace is becoming much more dynamic. Capabilities such as eSIM will help to drive that, I think, as well. I think an example of Denmark and New Day in Denmark actually sees itself as being a collection of different brands. So I think certainly we can say that NetCo-ServCo separation is likely to drive greater competition and greater innovation in that services market. Okay, next slide, please. So I think it's my last slide. So does the TM Forum of Open Digital Architecture facilitate delayering? And yes, we're going to say of course it does. And with good reason, I think, with very good reason, because I think if we compare the challenges for delayering and structural separation now compared with 10, 15, 20 years ago, the reason that telcos are integrated is because when you draw a line from the network into the customer-facing function systems, there's clearly a dependence and an inflexibility in terms of separating out those different functions that sit between the network and the customer. And so it simply was extraordinarily difficult to separate out horizontally the network and the services business. I think now we think about the componentization of IT systems. We think about the openness that's being driven in IT systems. We think about the use of APIs more broadly across IT and network to connect different systems. When we think about those different NetCo, ServCo, InfraCo organizations, in many ways it's an orchestration function that sits between them rather than being inflexible systems that sit between them. So it's absolutely, I think, true to say that the more operators embrace the ODA, the more they are giving themselves the opportunity to delay it in a relatively unfussy, uncomplicated way. And I think this is an important discussion because if you are an integrated telco looking to move towards a NetCo ServCo model, it could be 2, 3, 4 years of working out how to make that happen from a systems perspective. So clearly, the more you embrace openness, the easier that process is going to be. And I think going back to the rationale of why you should do this, I think the reason why there's general support of the concept of delayering within the telecoms operator business is because it does give you the option, if you want to, of structural separation, of spinning off, selling off certain parts of the organization. It gives you the possibility of doing that, even if that might not be the first thing that you do. Just looking at this slide you're looking at here, so you'll see, ServCo, NetCo, InfraCo. You'll see a couple of times a conversation about platforms, and I think platforms can sit at multiple levels. I think as the ServCo organization embraces cloud-native, platform-based approaches to delivering its solutions and capabilities, we can see telcos moving into a sort of provider of platforms, platform-based solutions, and end-to-end solutions built around connectivity. So there's a number of different, I think, TM Forum assets that can be applied to different parts of that value chain. Okay, I'm aware they've probably been speaking for too long, so now we're going to bring back, so Piyush and Dominic, so apologies for keeping you waiting in the wings there. If we can just take the slides down. Thank you so much, Maureen. And we move on to a discussion. And so I think in this discussion, we want to use Dominic's and Piyush's reach into the world of opcos to understand if this discussion is active and live, and from an operations, IT operating perspective, what are the main sort of issues and challenges? So Piyush, maybe I can just start with you. So are these discussions that you're having today? I mean, are you having active discussions today around delayering, Netco, ServCo? Do people use the word delayering, for example?
Yeah, sure, Mark. So, hello everyone. My name is Piyush, and I am part of.
Yes, I forgot to give you a chance to introduce yourself. So, Piyush, yes, you go. Please introduce yourself first. Apologies.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Piyush, and I lead pre-sales organization secretary, and I have a privilege to work with the CSPs across the globe. So I'm seeing the ecosystem, how it is evolving, how it is changing, and what type of challenges we are seeing in the CSPs across the globe, and how the alternate revenue streams are really coming out. And of course, if we talk about this delayering part mainly, which is going to talk about mainly the Netco Servco concept, I really see that this is something what is going to be one of the key differentiator, and what we see that when we talk about markets where we work from Africa, Middle East, or we talk about Latin America, this is something the telcos are really focusing that how whether they are really able to have the return on the investment what they are doing right now in network expansion, or talking about the fixed line network what they are expanding right now, or maybe investing on the 5G side of network, which is really is a necessity right now, looking for their proposition in the market, their their position, and also what value they can deliver to them. So majorly, if we talk about how does the customer sees right now, they're probably not using the terminologies what right now we are talking about, but this is very much in line to the approach where they are really looking for a decoupled approach where network should continue there, but they really want to limit themselves to their business, how they can reach out to the customer, how they can look for the adjacent revenue streams, maybe through verticals they want to focus and generate new revenue on top of the telco services what they are selling right now. Whether it comes through brands, whether it comes through adjacent verticals, this is something what they are evolving right now, and they are seeing the ServCo as an enabler for them. So yes, Mark, it's very well a trend we are seeing across the globe.
Thank you. Dominic, your introduction to you and Cerillion and what you do be useful.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, so my name's Dominic Smith. I'm the marketing director at Cerillion. We provide a wide range of BSS and OSS solutions to all types of CSPs around the world, and have been doing so for the last 25 years. This whole area of delayering, probably similar to Piyush, that the term delayering is not something that necessarily we hear regularly. Terms that we hear more often would be things like an open access model, for example, neutral host. That's another thing that comes up on a regular basis, but they're all built around really this same central concept of the separation between ServCo, NetCo, and InfraCo. And I think we're seeing that and are involved with operators on both the sort of northbound and southbound side. So you mentioned earlier, Mark, about Denmark and TDC and New Day. We also have experience in Denmark, but actually coming from quite a different position. So our experience there comes from working with Norlys, and Norlys was typically known as being a utility company in Denmark. And as part of that business, they then established a fiber broadband business, which was a vertically integrated business. But through the whole concept of an open access model or delayering, they saw an opportunity to say, actually, proactively, they could separate out the ServCo business from the NetCo business. that to give them an opportunity to develop those two lines of business more independently and have specialization around network rollouts and operational efficiency on that network side. And I think that whole efficiency piece is obviously, and automation as well, is a absolutely crucial to successful netco operation. But equally then on the ServCo side, really being able to focus around brand and customer and really being very close to those customers digitally. But in so doing, this sort of, I guess, created an opportunity for another organization that we work with as well, which is a company called OpenNet. That's two N's in the middle, so it's OpenNet. And OpenNet is essentially being established as a wholesale aggregator, a wholesale aggregation company that actually connects multiple netcos on the southbound side with multiple servcos on the northbound side. So, this really is that open access model where they are connecting, I think, over 15 service providers through the OpenNet platform to more than 10 netcos. And so as a servco, you get access to all of this sort of patchwork of fiber infrastructure to deliver your broadband service on basically a national basis, even if you didn't have that infrastructure yourself. And similarly, if you're the infrastructure side, you're the netco, you have access to sell your services through all of the different service provider brands. So it's created a very, very interesting and powerful model in terms of, allowing that brand and customer focus on the service side, but really allowing then the netcos to actually, focus on that great operational efficiency and automation and really excelling at that piece.
So interestingly, so I think, thanks, Dominic. So let's have this brief dig into the OpenNet. And so do all of the ServCo organizations, they only communicate with the netcos through OpenNet? Correct.
So that OpenNet piece in the middle is the gateway to and from either north or south. And of course, that integration layer that's provided there, things like the open APIs are absolutely critical to making that work, because you can't have 15 servcos all integrating in a different way into the wholesale platform. It has to be standardized, and that's where open APIs, ODA, and so on really bring a lot of value to the table.
And in terms of the netcos that sit underneath OpenNet, are they basically parts of an integrated jigsaw puzzle that gives you full Denmark coverage, or some of them doing different things and competing?
I think to a large degree, it's about assembling the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle so that you get that nationwide coverage. Of course, there's scope there for them to be some overlap between networks, but of course, things like rolling out fiber is a massively capital intensive business. And, the problem of overbuild in certain countries where you've got multiple competing operators digging up roads and putting fiber in makes no sense. So this provides a much more efficient way of providing high-speed broadband on a nationwide basis.
Thank you. So if we stick to this sort of strategic discussion first, I want to pick up actually on a couple of questions that come in. So Jonathan, thank you very much. Jonathan's always fantastic at asking the right questions. So, where is the ROI for delayering? If one layer is less profitable than the other, why would a company want to take that layer on? So it's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, I guess from my perspective, the point that I was trying to make in my side was that this is being driven by, from a financial valuation perspective or from a regulatory perspective. We haven't necessarily seen the ROI benefits coming through yet. Whether they will come through or not, I guess time will tell. I mean, my argument would be that we need to see a market mature in terms of seeing genuine independence of netco, servco businesses before we can actually see what's gonna happen. I don't know whether, Piyush, you have any thoughts on that in terms of, ROI?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point, and I think the ROI is, I'll not say that it's decoupled. It's definitely Netco and Serco ROI will be linked to each other. I definitely see, like as Dominic highlighted, that there are the vendors who are really laying down the fiber network across the globe, and I mean different countries have their own priorities, and it's going on a very massive way. Um, this is a huge investment. What telcos, I mean, all those telcos or maybe service providers who are laying it down. The actual ROI will become when actually it is getting consumed by the customers, and the customers will be like your enterprise customers, SMBs, or maybe talk about the retail customers. So there is a very strong need that whatever the investment is going on the network side, it has to be utilized in a best way by the end customers, and the servco are going to be enabler for this. So when we talk about an efficient servco platform, which is going to enable bridge between your netco and servco in terms of your wholesale retail settlements. Also at the servco side, if we talk about how you are able to reach your customer, how you are able to deliver experience what they are looking, whether we are able to provide the services what they are looking, and some dynamic monetization models. I think it's going to be helping them to generate revenue and get the right ROI from both the sides. So they are complementing each other in my view.
So it's interesting. I think you can look at ROI from perspective of an industry that may be able to create growth, but also an industry which may contract in the future. I mean, I would make the case that one of the reasons to delay and drive structural separation is that you have a better prospect of being in the driving seat when it comes to consolidation than if you don't separate out Netco, Servco. And I think there's kind of an inevitability that we're going to see network rationalization in the telecoms operator business. And I would certainly want to be investing in a company that was totally committed to the network business rather than one which risks being blown away by the wind of competition. So, I mean, Dominic, do you have any thoughts in terms of ROI for why this might happen, why this might make sense?
I mean, I think that, if I relate it to the Denmark model, the interesting thing about introducing the wholesale aggregation layer is because I suppose the traditional approach to structural separation has essentially left that wholesale piece sitting on the top side of the netco, and it's one netco offering services to multiple servcos. But of course, that netco is still underpinning everything. And, I guess we've had that to a large degree in the UK with OpenReach, for example. But actually, for that netco to genuinely become efficient and automation and be lean and provide the ROI, they actually need some genuine, sort of competition in the sense that if a servco is not happy with what they're getting through that netco, they can switch to another servco who is doing a build out in that area, for example. So I think, you have to look at that wholesale piece and how the wholesale piece is delivered to actually really establish the most value from this model, I believe.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. And I think I've long believed that wholesale represent opportunity for the business. If you think about areas such as IoT, I'm quite convinced that wholesale holds the key to IoT growth, totally convinced. And my sense today is that operators do not invest properly in wholesale systems. And wholesale is like this sort of backwater of the telco business where they do a lot of stuff very manually, and it's not delivered. It's not, I mean, wholesale could be a platform very easily, couldn't it? We should really reimagine wholesale as being a platform where anybody can come in and buy access to wholesale services, and maybe a netco organization that does take some priority. Also, I think when we think about concepts such as network slicing and network as a service and network APIs, all of these new connectivity capabilities they lend themselves to wholesale better than retail, I would argue, because they're parts of an ICT solution. They're not just the connectivity. So, Piyush, any thoughts to you on? I mean, I know that your business is. I guess you think yourself more in the BSS space, but I think but if there was demand there for wholesale, then I'm sure you'd have the capabilities to sort of deliver
Absolutely.
solutions.
So I think the wholesale business is something which is getting more and more modernized and automated. This is one of the major area because I think the wholesale is one of the major bridge between your network and circle, as I mentioned in my previous, the question also. So the point is like how we are able to mature this platform, which is going to enable your experience for your end customers. So I'll give an example. Like most of this telcos, when they are going into delayering concept, they are actually establishing a platform which is more robust. And of course, thanks to TM Forum, which is very giving very clear definition in terms of decoupling services, talking about open APIs, and also how it can segregate different brands. So if tomorrow we are talking about the Celco platform, which is going to be utilized by a bank, or maybe talk about healthcare, we talk about some other vertical, which is going to like any OTT service provider. It is in a way creating any competition. At the same time, it is also generating new revenue streams for the telco and end customers. So they are not going to invent wheel from beginning where that how I'm going to get my entire spectrum. They are getting a platform which is helping them to you know independently launch their services, define their own plans, define their own products, bundle it, and generate the revenue, and share the revenue as part of the settlement along with the service providers. So this
Yeah.
is something what a major trend we are seeing, and this is the good part is it is going across verticals. It's no more limiting you that you had to be on the a telco service provider. Of course, as you gave an example of IoT, private networks, they are really looking for selling a bundled offer to their end customers. I want to set up a campus network. Why I should go and buy the entire ecosystem on offer in terms of my connectivity devices, or we talk about towers or something. If it is available as a bundled offer via this circle layer, it will be very easy to establish, fulfill it, and launch the services.
Yeah.
Another big aspect what we are seeing right now is intelligence on top of the AI/ML journey, which is getting embedded more and more, which is giving you a very good perspective that what services, what market, what region, what segment we are offering these services. Am I really able to get the ROI on this? If not, what should be the alternate way to do this? And I really feel that it is an embedded part of now your stack, what you're selling, or maybe embedded part of your self journey. Yeah, so Mark, this is what I mean we experience right now from our markets where we are serving and the customers we are serving.
Thank you, Gary. So talk a little bit about what delayering is, what it could be. I think if we move on to the how, and I think the how is a lot of the how is what we do with what we used to call what we sometimes call BSS OSS systems, and I guess you can either divide up your existing systems by application area. You can let either Netco have the existing systems and the ServCo buy new ones, or the other way around, or you can have both the organizations can invest from scratch, or you can do, Dominic, what has happened in Denmark and had this organization in the middle. I mean, your work with OpenNet, has it given you confidence that could be a model that could be extended beyond the particular dynamics of a sort of a municipality-based utility broadband into mobile, into other countries?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose if we look at a couple of different scenarios, so one is going beyond the sort of fiber broadband into mobile and other services. That is an obvious step, and of course, one of the keys to that, and I suppose one of the questions in terms of the BSS and OSS separation, is where and how you separate out the service fulfillment and the service sort of decomposition, if you like. Because if you have these multiple netcos and multiple infrastructure at the bottom, you probably need to have the intelligence higher up in the stack that actually determines where services are going to be fulfilled. Whereas if you're in a simple scenario where there's only one netco, then the service decomposition can happen in there. But of course, actually, you know, the opportunity, when you're going out into mobile and into other verticals and so on, you probably do want to have that intelligence higher up the chain so that you can then distribute and provision, activate services across multiple different networks. So I think that's one aspect. The other aspect here in terms of this model and where opportunities exist is perhaps looking at things like smart cities. And smart cities are, you know, perhaps the ultimate example of where you really want to have a limited number of infrastructure providers. You know, you want to put in the intelligence into the city from the beginning. And, you know, we're involved in a project in Egypt with ACUD, which is one of these new mega cities that is being built in the desert. And of course, it's being connected up with fiber and sensors from the ground up. So you only really want to have one set of infrastructure, but then on top of that, you need to have the operational efficiency from a network operating model, but then you want to have the wholesale and retail separation that allows different types of service provider to use that capability in the network to package up, whether it's transport services, healthcare services, social services, you know, and that can all be done if you have those layers in the model that gives you the separation between wholesale and retail.
Yeah. Thanks. Piyush, I mean, I guess the simplest way of looking at NetCo, ServCo is obviously the OSS assets go to NetCo and the BSS assets go to ServCo, but there's bits that need dividing up. But I mean, it does sound like quite a difficult, long, complex process to me if you haven't modernized your systems already. Would you agree with that?
So Mark, my point is, I mean, with the evolving architecture, and of course, we are talking about software-defined networks when we talk about the layer between, you know, OSS and BSS is thin. You know, it's now more and more thinner. It's very, you know, we don't, when we talk about any new 5G services, it's definitely it's very difficult to, you know, segregate what is going as part of OSS, what is going as part of BSS fundamentally, of course, because there are a lot of, you know, shared services come. And one of the major aspects what we have seen that when we go for a model like ServCo, NetCo, maybe we give an examples like we talk about, we work majorly with the large groups in Africa and Middle East and in Latin also. Their objective of, you know, bringing such ecosystem is they really want to make it, you know, they want to grow their revenue independently of the network. The network is definitely going to be an enabler to them. But whether should I have OSS or should I get OSS from outside or it has to be towards BSS layer, this is the freedom they are building it right now. So that it has to be expanded as and when the business requires. Maybe we are talking about certain OSS assets which are not immediately needed for a certain line of business, certain, you know, business growth. But in future, if you want to add, should we invest right now? Should we bring it later? So they are really looking for those modular capability and in the extensibility in future. And this is what the principle, you know, we see. The delayering, like, you know, when you see potential, where you want to focus, I think you should expand. And these all are getting more plug and play because of the open APIs, because of the compliances of, you know, we talk about TM forum, and they are able to talk to, right? We talk about a slicing manager talking to your network, you know, OSS layer or maybe the order management layer. They all can talk on TM forum stand. So in my view, I think no need to have a full ecosystem of OSS and BSS, you know, from the beginning or maybe having it readily available. It's a mode where pay as you grow sort of things which comes on customer side. You can also grow. You can grow and you can add as your business.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to build the telecoms industry from scratch today, if nothing existed, would we definitively build a NetCo, ServCo model?
So I think yes.
That's okay.
Sorry, Mark. So I'll first give my perspective. I think it will be like a restart probably I'll use it a word like a restart. When we come from a generation of a legacy network to now we are talking about 5G and 6G network. And of course, when we know the network is one of the major, enabler of your, the connectivity part, which is one of the major aspects of your revenue generation. I think this would be like a restart. This would be like a new beginning where you are opening your platform. You are giving opportunity to become more like a reseller, more like a distributor, more like an enabler in this complete ecosystem. And you are providing more vast connectivity ecosystem because right now telcos, they a lot of telcos launch 5G services, but they have not gone in a pure commercial model. The reason is there are a lot of ifs and buts. There are a lot of challenges. How whether it will be successful, not successful, how much revenue it's going to be generated. And there's a reason there are a lot of thoughts around this. So in my view, it will be like will be like a win-win situation if it really goes like a beginning, Mark.
Yeah. Dominic, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah,
put you on the spot with that one. Sorry.
that's okay. No, I mean, I think obviously if you look at how the world has evolved and you look at the sort of digital services landscape, if you forget for a moment all of the complex telecoms infrastructure that's under the hood that makes the internet work, you've essentially got this very broad array of digital service providers that are at the top level servcos, and you have that inherent split between connectivity and services. It's just that at the moment the connectivity piece is a huge complicated patchwork that is formed underneath that. Of course you would want to try and have a simpler and cleaner architecture if you're building that from scratch at the bottom, but equally you still need to make sure you've got competition. You can't have all of the power lying in the hands of one infrastructure provider who's building it and is setting the rules about how that is being used. So I think this separation is needed, but you do need to have competition in each layer for it to be successful.
But the level of competition might not be the same. And I guess that's what it comes down to, which is that what is the right level of competition in network? What's the right level of competition in services? And I think we're already seeing through the MVNO market, through operators launching digital brands, that we know that the market lends itself to more than just 4 or 5 retail providers. We can see that it's a highly innovative marketplace. What I guess we don't know is network economics, do we? So we mentioned something like NBN Co, which is the one provider of broadband in Australia, and there is no competition, and there you have a problem with them meeting the demand of customers, and it's government owned. But is 2 the magic number? Is 2 plus is 1 plus regional plays a magic number? I guess we don't know. So
I think I have seen there has been some research done around markets where there are 2, 3, 4 infrastructure main networks, and I think there is definitely a leaning towards coming down from 4 to 3, in some cases 2, but and in terms of the success in those markets. But it's an interesting balance.
I mean, coming back to, and there's another question here from Luca. I'm skeptical about the improvement in the business performance, particularly for Sercos, for 2 main reasons. The one's about economies of scale around creating IT, HR systems. The other point that Luca makes about cultural and skills reasons. But it seems to me that it would be difficult to make the case strategically today for saying we're going to build systems that enable us to do NetCo, ServCo. But what you can do is to say, look, we're already moving towards openness, and every telco is moving towards openness to a greater or lesser degree. Every telco in the world is doing it. The question of when it's going to happen. And so, what you are doing by building openness is you're giving yourselves a greater opportunity, if you want to separate out, spin off different bits of the business. And also you're giving yourselves more opportunity to realize value by if a financial investor does come along and says, look, we'd love to take a stake in your network business. If you've got the IT in place, which means that they can make that happen in 6 months rather than 3 years, surely that's a good thing for the organization. So it seemed to me that it might not be in itself the single strategic driver for the organization, but it's certainly something that can add weight to a move towards more.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, again, the sort of this delayering model really fits with the, the breaking up of the traditional BSS and OSS stacks and moving much more to an as a service model. And, we see that a lot anyway. And that's where, if you want to be a lightweight and agile servco, you need a lightweight and agile set of support systems that will enable you to do that, and that is perfectly suited to the cloud delivery and as a service models.
Yeah. And I guess going into the servco part. So Piyush, I know that you've spoken to me about this before, which is that we've talked for a long time about telcos becoming retailers and providers of other services, and telcos already, I guess, they'll resell OTT video service, but they talk about becoming marketplaces, consumer B2B, maybe not. Presumably, if you are a servco organization, you have no choice but to move in that direction, or you would definitively move in that direction. And do you have any good examples, Piyush, of telcos that you speak to who are absolutely committed to becoming stronger retail providers of different services in B2B and B2C?
Absolutely. So I think it's I'll take two examples from different regions. So when we work with a large telco operator in Latin America, they're very predominantly selling some of the OTT services on top of their BSS system. And they are really playing a role of where they are like in a reseller, and they are also like, providing as an aggregator. So the platform, what they actually enhance is like, without, disturbing the underlying ecosystem of BSS, they really look for some, couple of components, how it is enabling in their journey where they can onboard more and more OTT providers, maybe the global OTT providers, and there's some regional OTT providers, their channel content, allow them to be, sold at a very specific pricing. Should be, the price, it priced differently for different regions, for the different type of customers, and they are able to generate revenue and this going in revenue settle model later. So it's a very interesting, on the top service what they're selling right now on the telco system, and the customers are telcos, their existing customer as well as the non-telco customers. Another big focus, what interesting case, what we see in Africa, where you talked about brands, different brands which are getting launched. The brands are interestingly not only focused on their just traditional voice and SMS data. They are really looking for some add-on capabilities which they are trying to sell through marketplace. They are, they are looking for a bundled service, what we can offer from edtech, healthcare, or if we talk about maybe the gaming. And these are some new revenue streams which are coming. They don't want to go very, thick in terms of managing this entire ecosystem. They want to remain more lean. They want to be more experimental, that where I'm getting the revenue and how it is going to flow. So these are two very interesting examples, which is helping multi-brands, multi-MVNOs. At the same time, they are also going in the one step beyond in terms of selling the services.
Thank you. Dominic, I'll give you the last word, thinking about, I guess, the servco organization and the extent to which there is, I guess, untapped potential into moving into reselling other services.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I think that's going to be the absolute key for the servcos. And I think this is where it will be very interesting to see whether the servcos that are formed through the breakup of an integrated telco, can they change their mindset and their culture enough to be able to move into those areas versus the servcos that are either newly formed or come in from a different area to offer telecommunication services, broadband, mobile as part of their portfolio. Because I think this is the bit where, to be successful again in this delayered model, you have to sort of be free from the shackles of the old world in which you operated, which was that 5 nines availability network, everything else. And so it's the servcos have to embrace the fail fast digital services culture that you know, we've talked about now for a number of years, but not many telcos have been able to kind of make that leap. So I think, you know, having the competition from digital services providers coming into this space is probably what is going to make or break them.
Yeah. So I'm aware we've ticked up to the hour. So Dominic and Piyush, thank you so much for your time. To all those of you out there, I hope you enjoyed the session. Remember to check on to Team Forum website to find the report. And thank you for your time. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.